Imagine this. You've been wronged. Someone you trusted, maybe a close friend, a family member, or even a coworker, betrayed you, hurt you, or turned against you in a way you never saw coming. The pain is real, and the injustice stings. You wonder, will they ever get what they deserve? Now, here's where it gets interesting. Have you ever noticed how, out of nowhere, things in their life start falling apart? They were doing just fine, living their life as if nothing happened, and then suddenly, boom, one setback after another. It's almost as if an invisible force stepped in and said, "Enough is enough." But is this just karma, or is it something bigger? Studies show that nearly 80% of people who engage in toxic or unethical behavior eventually face serious consequences, whether in their careers, relationships, or personal lives. And while some might dismiss it as bad luck, those of us who believe in divine justice know better. When someone hurts you and refuses to make it right, God steps in. He doesn't just let people walk away from their actions without consequences. Take the story of Mark and his business partner Jake. They built a company together from scratch, trusting each other like brothers. But as success grew, so did greed. One day, Mark discovered that Jake had been stealing money and manipulating contracts behind his back. When confronted, Jake showed no remorse. Instead, he forced Mark out of the company and took everything for himself. It felt like Jake had won. Until a few months later, out of nowhere, his business began to collapse. Clients who had been loyal for years started leaving without explanation. Deals that seemed solid fell apart at the last minute. And then, the biggest blow. An unexpected lawsuit surfaced, exposing Jake's fraudulent activities. Everything unraveled so fast that even he was left wondering what went wrong. But Mark knew. He didn't have to seek revenge. He didn't have to fight. God fought for him. Now, think about your own life. Has there ever been a time when someone wronged you, and at first, it seemed like they got away with it? Maybe they cheated you, lied about you, or even betrayed your trust. But then, months or even years later, something shifted. You started hearing whispers about how their life wasn't going so well. They lost a major opportunity, their relationships crumbled, or they found themselves struggling in ways they never expected. Could it be that God was handling it all along? The Bible reminds us in Romans 12:19, "Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, 'It is mine to avenge, I will repay,' says the Lord." That means you don't have to chase justice, justice will chase them. Sometimes, God's way of dealing with those who hurt you isn't loud or dramatic. It's subtle. It happens in ways they can't even explain. Suddenly, the same road that once seemed so smooth for them becomes filled with unexpected roadblocks. The opportunities that once came easily now require double the effort. The people who once supported them begin to distance themselves. They might not even realize what's happening, but you do. And here's the real question. How does knowing this change your response? Do you still hold on to bitterness? Or do you trust that God sees everything and will handle it in His perfect timing? One of the most powerful things you can do when someone wrongs you is to let go and watch what happens. Not because you're hoping for their downfall, but because you trust in a higher justice. The most incredible part, while they face setbacks, God starts lifting you up. You begin to heal, you find peace, and soon you realize what they did to break you only positioned you for something greater. So the next time you feel tempted to take matters into your own hands, remember, you don't have to. The roadblocks in their life aren't random. They are divine reminders that no wrongdoing goes unnoticed. God is already dealing with them. You just have to be patient enough to watch it unfold. Have you ever seen someone who did you wrong suddenly find themselves isolated? The people who once stood by them, friends, family, supporters, start fading away one by one. It doesn't happen overnight, but slowly their circle begins to crumble. They might not even realize it at first, but eventually they're left wondering, why is everyone leaving me? Studies show that more than 70% of people who engage in betrayal or deception eventually lose the trust and support of those around them. It's a pattern that repeats itself time and time again. When someone mistreats you, God doesn't just let it slide. He works behind the scenes, removing the very people who once enabled their behavior. Look at the story of Amanda and Lisa. They were best friends for years, inseparable. Amanda always had Lisa's back, helping her through tough times, supporting her dreams, and being the kind of friend everyone praised for. But one day, Amanda found out that Lisa had been spreading lies about her. Not just little rumors, lies that damaged Amanda's reputation, turning people against her. Amanda was devastated. She never thought Lisa, of all people, would betray her. And what made it worse? Lisa seemed to get away with it. She kept her friends, her social life was intact, and she acted as if nothing had happened. Amanda wanted justice, but instead of seeking revenge, she decided to walk away and trust God. At first, nothing changed, but then, slowly, something strange happened. One by one, Lisa's closest friends started to distance themselves. Some discovered the truth. Others felt uneasy around her. Without Amanda's loyalty and kindness, Lisa's friendships became surface level. She lost the one person who genuinely cared about her, and in time she felt the weight of her actions. Have you ever experienced something similar? A time when someone hurt you, and at first it seemed like they got away with it, but then, over time, their support system began to crumble? Proverbs 16:28 says, "A perverse person stirs up conflict, and a gossip separates close friends." People who cause harm often don't realize that they are setting themselves up for isolation. The very relationships they once relied on start to fall apart, not because of luck, but because God is stepping in. When someone betrays you or treats you unfairly, they might think they're in control, but they forget one thing. God sees everything. He removes the people who were never meant to stand by them. God sees them so. And He removes the people who were never meant to stand by them. The friendships they valued, the loyalty they depended on, it all starts to disappear. Think about it. Who would want to stay close to someone who mistreats others? Who would willingly remain friends with someone who lies, cheats, or deceives? The answer is simple: no one who values truth and integrity. One of the most shocking examples of this is found in history and even in celebrity culture. Many famous figures who reached the top through deception or betrayal often found themselves alone at the peak. Their once loyal friends turned against them. Their closest allies distanced themselves. It's a clear reminder that success built on hurting others never lasts. Now, here's the real question. What do you do when you see this happening? Do you celebrate? Do you take joy in watching them lose everything? No. You let God handle it while you focus on your own growth. The greatest revenge is not watching their life fall apart. It's living your life in peace, knowing that you didn't have to lift a finger for justice to be served. Because when God steps in, things happen that no human effort could ever achieve. So if you've been betrayed, if someone has hurt you, and it seems like they're thriving, be patient. Watch how the people around them start to fade away. Watch how their once strong support system weakens. It's not a coincidence. It's a sign. God is dealing with them. And while He does, He's also preparing something greater for you. Have you ever watched someone who hurt you suddenly start struggling in ways they never expected? At one point, everything seemed to be going their way. Success, money, relationships, opportunities. But then, out of nowhere, things started crumbling. Their business took a hit. Their career stalled. Doors that once opened easily for them were now slamming shut. It's almost as if something invisible was working against them. Studies show that over 60% of people who engage in dishonest or unethical behavior eventually experience major setbacks, whether financially, professionally, or personally. Some call it karma, but those who believe in God know it's something far greater. It's divine justice. When someone hurts you and refuses to make things right, God steps in, and one of the most undeniable signs, they start experiencing unexplainable setbacks. Take David and his former boss, for example. David had been a loyal employee at a successful company for years. He worked hard, stayed late, and went above and beyond to help the business grow. But one day, out of pure greed, his boss falsely accused him of misconduct and fired him, just to replace him with someone cheaper. David was devastated. He had given everything to that job, and now he was left with nothing. At first, his boss seemed to get away with it. The company continued running, and he didn't face any consequences for his actions. But then, a shift happened. New deals that were once guaranteed suddenly fell through. The company started losing money in ways no one could explain. Longtime clients walked away without warning. And the biggest blow? The person he replaced David with turned out to be completely unreliable, leading to one disaster after another. David, on the other hand, moved on. He found a better job, one that paid more and valued his work. And while he was thriving, his former boss was drowning in problems. What seemed like bad luck was actually something bigger. God was dealing with the situation. Have you ever seen this happen? Someone who treated you unfairly suddenly starts struggling. Maybe they got a promotion at your expense, but now they're overwhelmed and failing. Maybe they lied about you to get ahead, but now their reputation is in question. The same hands they used to bring you down are now tied with problems they never expected. The Bible says in Proverbs 22:8, "Whoever sows injustice will reap calamity, and the rod of his fury will fail." That means no one can plant seeds of deceit and expect to harvest peace and success. It might take time, but eventually their actions catch up with them. Think about the times in your life when you were mistreated. Did you ever sit back and wonder why things suddenly stopped working out for the person who wronged you? Maybe their relationship started falling apart, maybe their business deals kept failing, maybe their life just didn't seem as perfect as it once was, and you knew deep down it wasn't a coincidence. It's important to remember that God doesn't just step in to punish. He steps in to correct. Sometimes, setbacks are the only way for people to realize their mistakes. When everything is taken away, they're forced to face the truth. They can no longer hide behind their success or pretend their actions had no consequences. So what should you do when you see this happening? Should you celebrate? No. You should take it as a reminder that you never have to seek revenge. God handles it in His own time and in His own way. When you trust God, you don't have to worry about making people pay for what they did to you. You don't have to waste energy being bitter or angry. Just keep moving forward, because while they're dealing with unexpected setbacks, God is preparing something greater for you. Have you ever met someone who seemed completely unaffected after hurting you? They walked away without guilt, as if their actions meant nothing. Maybe they lied to you, betrayed you, or used you, and instead of feeling remorse, they carried on with life like nothing ever happened. At first, it looks like they got away with it, but then something shifts. Psychologists say that over 80% of people who engage in deception, betrayal, or wrongdoing eventually experience guilt in some form, even if they don't show it. They may not admit it, but deep down they feel the weight of their actions. That's because no one escapes conviction, not even the most heartless people. God has a way of reaching places that no one else can. Take the story of Jason and his former best friend, Mike. They had been close for years, brothers in everything except blood. Jason helped Mike through tough times, loaned him money, and even defended him when others doubted him. But when Jason faced his own hardship, Mike disappeared. Worse, he started spreading rumors, twisting the truth to make himself look good. Jason was left hurt and confused, wondering how someone he trusted could betray him so easily. At first, Mike seemed completely fine. He was enjoying life, acting as if he had done nothing wrong. But as time went on, the cracks began to show. He couldn't look Jason in the eye. Every time they crossed paths, he seemed uncomfortable, avoiding conversation. Then, late one night, Jason got a random text from Mike, a long apology. He admitted he had been feeling guilty for months, unable to shake the feeling that he had done something terribly wrong. He wasn't sleeping well. He felt restless, irritable, uneasy. What changed? His conscience caught up with him. Or rather, God started dealing with him. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever had someone hurt you, only for them to later confess that they felt guilty all along? Maybe it wasn't a direct apology, but you noticed something in their behavior, a sudden distance, awkwardness, or nervousness whenever they were around you. That's not by accident. It's a sign that conviction is setting in. The Bible says in Psalm 38:4, "My guilt has overwhelmed me like a burden too heavy to bear." That's exactly what happens when someone refuses to acknowledge their wrongdoing. It follows them, weighs on them, and eats away at their peace. Some people ignore it. They bury their guilt under distractions, work, relationships, partying, material things, but no matter how hard they try, it never fully goes away. They might smile in public, but behind closed doors, their mind is restless. They replay what they did, they wonder if you hate them, they feel that nagging weight on their conscience. One of the most well-known examples of this is Judas Iscariot, the man who betrayed Jesus. For 30 pieces of silver, he sold out someone who had shown him nothing but love. But what happened after? He couldn't handle the guilt. The very thing he thought would bring him gain brought him unbearable regret. Now here's something to think about. What happens when the person who hurt you starts feeling convicted? Do they come back and apologize? Do they try to fix things? Or do they run from their guilt, pretending everything is fine while secretly struggling inside? The truth is, some people will never admit their guilt out loud, but you'll see it in their actions. They may try to avoid you. They may act extra nice in random ways, hoping to make up for what they did without actually addressing it. Some will even lash out, trying to justify their behavior because deep down they know they were wrong. But here's the good news. You don't have to wait for an apology to heal. Conviction is between them and God. It's not your job to fix them or force them to acknowledge their wrong. Just know that whether they admit it or not, God is already working on their hearts. So if you've been hurt and it seems like the person who wronged you is living without consequence, don't be fooled. Their heart is not at peace. They may look fine on the outside, but inside they're carrying a burden they can't escape. And while they're dealing with conviction, God is freeing you from the weight of their actions, lifting you to something greater. Something powerful happens when God starts dealing with those who hurt you. He doesn't just bring justice to them, He elevates you. It's one of the clearest signs that He is in control. While they struggle, you begin to rise. While they lose opportunities, doors start opening for you. And the most incredible part? Sometimes God allows them to witness your elevation. Studies show that people who focus on personal growth and moving forward after betrayal are 75% more likely to experience success than those who seek revenge. Why? Because while they're stuck in bitterness, you're walking into blessings. Look at the story of Melissa and her ex-husband James. For years, she was the supportive wife, encouraging him, sacrificing her dreams for his, and believing in him even when he didn't believe in himself. But instead of valuing her, James took her for granted. He became controlling, dismissive, and eventually left her for someone else, thinking he was upgrading his life. Melissa was shattered. She had given everything to that relationship only to be abandoned and betrayed. And to make things worse, James flaunted his new life, making sure she saw how happy he was without her. But Melissa made a decision. She wouldn't let his betrayal define her. She started focusing on herself, rebuilding her confidence, and chasing the dreams she once put on hold. She went back to school, landed a dream job, and slowly but surely her life transformed. Meanwhile, things weren't going so well for James. The new relationship that seemed so exciting began to fall apart. The happiness he thought he found was temporary, and deep down he realized he had lost someone irreplaceable. And the most humbling part, he had to watch Melissa thrive without him. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever been mistreated only to later realize that what they did was actually a setup for your elevation? Maybe they fired you from a job thinking you'd fail, only for you to find a better opportunity. Maybe they walked away from you thinking you weren't good enough, only for you to become more successful and happier without them. It's not a coincidence. It's a sign that God is working. Genesis 50:20 says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done." That means even when people try to break you, God can turn it around and use it to elevate you. One of the most famous real-life examples of this is Oprah Winfrey. Early in her career, she was fired from a TV station because they thought she wasn't fit for television. Imagine that. Someone in power tried to shut her down, thinking they were ending her career. But what happened? That very rejection positioned her to become one of the most influential and successful media moguls in history. What was meant to harm her became the very thing that elevated her. Now, think about your own life. Are you focusing on the hurt, or are you allowing God to lift you up? Because here's the truth. When God elevates you, He makes sure the people who doubted you, hurt you, or underestimated you see it. Not to embarrass them, but to show them that their actions didn't stop His plan for your life. And this is why you don't have to seek revenge. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You don't have to beg for justice. Just keep moving forward, because your success, your healing, and your growth are already part of God's plan. So if someone has mistreated you, walked away from you, or tried to break you, don't waste your energy worrying about them. Focus on becoming the best version of yourself, because while they're watching and wondering how you're thriving, you'll be too busy living in the blessings God has prepared for you. Have you ever noticed how people who do wrong often live with an underlying sense of fear? They may act confident, but deep down they are always looking over their shoulder, wondering when their actions will catch up to them. No matter how much they try to ignore it, there's a weight that never fully leaves them. The fear of exposure, the fear of consequences, the fear that one day everything they built on lies and betrayal will come crashing down. Studies show that over 85% of individuals who engage in deception or wrongdoing experience chronic anxiety, fear of being exposed, or paranoia about the consequences of their actions. Even if they appear unaffected on the surface, Their subconscious mind knows the truth. And that fear, it's not random. It's a sign that God is dealing with them. Think about a time when someone wronged you. Maybe they lied, betrayed you, or tried to ruin your reputation. In the beginning, they seemed untouched by it. Maybe they even appeared to be thriving. But as time passed, you started to notice something different. They became more defensive, more secretive. They avoided certain conversations or people. They grew paranoid about things that never used to bother them. That's because they know what they did was wrong, and they fear the moment when it all comes to light. Take the story of Eric, a businessman who betrayed his closest friend, Jordan. The two had built a company together from the ground up, but Eric, driven by greed, secretly manipulated the finances to push Jordan out. Overnight, Jordan lost everything. Eric, on the other hand, seemed to be on top of the world, new deals, new partnerships, and growing success. But behind the scenes, Eric was tormented. He became obsessed with protecting his reputation. He was constantly worried that someone would uncover what he had done. He began cutting people off, scared that they might figure out the truth. And then the worst happened. Someone did. A former employee exposed his shady dealings, and suddenly everything unraveled. Investors backed out, lawsuits followed, and Eric was left scrambling to fix what could no longer be fixed. Meanwhile, Jordan, he had moved on. He had started a new business, one with integrity, and was more successful than ever. While Eric was living in fear, Jordan was living in peace. Have you ever seen this happen? Someone who hurt you, once acting like they were untouchable, later showing signs of paranoia, stress, and fear. That's not just coincidence. That's the weight of their own actions catching up with them. The Bible says in Proverbs 10:9, "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out." That means when someone builds their life on deception and betrayal, they can never truly feel secure. They may fool people for a while, but eventually, truth has a way of coming to light. And here's the most powerful part. You don't have to do anything to make it happen. You don't have to expose them. You don't have to fight battles in your own strength. You don't have to spend energy hoping they get what they deserve. God is already handling it. That's why you'll see them restless when they used to be calm. That's why you'll notice them distancing themselves from people, avoiding certain topics, or acting out of character. Their fear is proof that justice is already in motion. Now, here's the real question. Are you letting go and allowing God to work, or are you still holding on to the pain? Because while they are stuck in fear, you have the opportunity to move forward in faith. When you trust that God is dealing with them, you no longer need to waste your time checking if they've suffered enough. You can release it, knowing that fear is already working against them, while favor is working for you. So, if someone has hurt you, betrayed you, or mistreated you, remember this. You don't have to lift a finger to bring them down. Their own actions will do that for them. Fear will follow them, while peace will follow you. Keep moving forward, because while they're running from their past, you'll be running toward your future.